Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us on the 2023 EMS Stroke Quality Improvement Awards. My name is Katherine Johnson, and I'll be your host today. The session will be recorded and available to view again for those who are unable to make it on our YouTube channel. As usual, your lines have been muted upon entry to this webinar. Unless you are presenting, please keep yourself muted. There are other ways of interacting with WebEx features that I'd like you to be aware of, like sharing a reaction or clicking on the smiley face. We encourage you to use reactions during the meeting to pop up the speakers and express yourself. Please note if you're viewing this on YouTube, you cannot see the expressions. They are not recorded. Thank you. Another way to interact during the webinar is to use the chat feature. Please ask questions by typing them in the chat throughout the presentation. Make sure to select everyone in the chat box. We will keep track of these questions and we'll address them at the end of the presentation or within the webinar follow-up email. On the agenda today, we will discuss the objectives and then move on to the overview award program and changes you can expect in 2024. Then each award recipient will share their information on their project during the showcase. The objectives for today for the EMS Stroke Quality Improvement Awards program are identify the benefits of collecting and using data for quality improvement at your EMS agency, learn about methods and approaches the EMS agency took during their quality improvement, and describe the purpose of the MDH Stroke Quality Improvement Awards program. Some program updates. Please save the date for May 23rd, 2024. We will have a stroke coordinator half-day workshop. The flyer that you see here will also be in our follow-up email. Friendly reminder that the next round of acute stroke-ready hospital designation applications are due in the Minnesota Stroke Portal, April 1st, 2024. Contact Michelle Gray-Ansari at state.mn.us with any designation questions. And look out for our April webinar invite. We are privileged to host the Minnesota Stroke Association and stroke survivor guest speaker who will be sharing their personal journey with us. You will also learn about available stroke awareness resources to help prepare for the Stroke Awareness Month of May. Before we jump into announcing the award recipients, let's quickly review why we have this program and the changes in the 2024 application. The purpose of the program is to recognize and showcase successful quality improvement projects throughout the state of Minnesota's EMS agencies. I hope that if you applied this round and did not receive an award, please don't be discouraged and keep applying. The same goes for if you've been thinking that your project doesn't qualify for an award, please email me so we can see if it might fit. We have 2 award categories this year, Extraordinary Results Award and Commitment to Excellence Award. We'll review a description of each of the categories during the showcase. If you're looking for more inspiration after today's webinar, please check out the Stroke Quality Improvement Awards page specifically for EMS on our program's website. You can read about the 2022 and 2023 award recipients. This is also where you can find more information about the 2024 Stroke Quality Improvement Awards and the new application. So how can you apply for 2024? We've moved the application over to REDCap. What's great about REDCap is you can save your work, and it's not a Word document that you have to control the edits on. And all you need to do is click the Save Return Later box, type in your email, and you'll receive a link to your application. You'll receive a copy of your application with a confirmation email after submitting. Now some tips and tricks on how to submit successfully in REDCap. You need to answer each prompt. Sometimes you may need to repeat some information, and that's okay. Just be sure to give us the best answer for each prompt. And double check your email address, as this is a way to save your work and also get some submission confirmation email with a copy of your application. Excuse me. You can collaborate with your colleagues as well. Just share the link in your in-progress application. And lastly, let us know if you did not receive a confirmation email so we can look it up and ensure it was successfully submitted. And obviously, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to get a hold of me. The first award category we are presenting today is Commitment to Excellence Award. This award recognizes commitment to program goals and the best practices in providing excellent stroke care. In this category, we have 2 awardees. Our first awardee is Wyndham Ambulance, located in the Southwest EMS region. Presenting for Wyndham Ambulance today is the ambulance director, Kristen Porath. Kristen, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Kristen Porth, Director of Wyndham Ambulance in Wyndham Southwest Corner, down by Worthington. I recently took over director about 1.5 years ago, so this is a fairly new role for myself. I've been on an EMT on our squad for almost 9 years now, so I transitioned from an administrative job and am full-time, and I am the only full-time position on our ambulance. The rest are volunteers. Quality improvement plan, we focused on the on-time scene to hospital response time. Our team members for this stroke program was our Wyndham Area Health Stroke Coordinator, who is Katie Bennett. She's an RN. Our Director of Nursing, Landon Johnson, who is an RN and also an EMT on our ambulance squad. Our Medical Director, Dr. Jeff Tabor, and then myself. When MDH came out with the new stroke protocols, Katie decided we should update all our parameters. And there was just a few things to change for our service and for the hospital. So that's what we focused on for us, was our on-scene time to the hospital. Next slide. With the focus area that we were concentrating on, it was the on-scene time of 10 minutes or less, with transferring the patient to the hospital CT room upon arrival to the ED. On scene, our focus is doing assessments, the ABCs, vital signs, O2 saturations, with a goal of 94% and above. For room air, we use the BFAST stroke scale, and we check blood glucose while we're on scene. The other important things that we establish when we're on scene is the last known well time, onset of symptoms, and then we notify the hospital of what we're finding while we're on scene with the patient. When we do the BFAST stroke scale, I don't know if everybody's familiar with that, but it's balance, eyes, face, arms, speech, and time are the parameters that we're looking at for testing on our stroke scale. Next slide. Monitoring performance. Our program uses that BFAST stroke screen, and then in that slide you can see the stroke screen form that we fill out, and then we have a performance improvement filter that the hospital uses for our feedback. When we fill out that that form, it has the patient's names, our EMTs that were involved in the call, and then our screening criteria, the ABCs, oxygen, blood glucose, and then the BFAST scale that we select the information on. And then it has a time that we notify the hospital of the stroke activation, the last known well time, and then just a reminder of our expediting transport to the hospital. This becomes part of the patient's record for the ambulance and as well as the hospital. And we fill these out on anything that comes in that has stroke symptoms. Excuse me, next slide. Implementation of the plan. Like I said earlier, we reviewed the DHS, Minnesota DHS stroke protocols, and then we revised our protocols with Katie, our stroke coordinator, our director of nursing, Landon, and Dr. Tabor, our medical director. They reviewed our plans, we reviewed what the hospital had, and then we coordinated all those changes together. The medical director for us, he's been part of our ambulance squad for about 30 years, so he's got a good understanding and basis of how we operate. And he also is part of the hospital. He works for the clinic, Sanford Clinic, and then has patients in the hospital. So he's got a good understanding of how we interact with the hospital and our protocols and how we respond as an ambulance group with the hospital coordination. Next slide. The PI filter, the performance improvement filter that the hospital uses, has all the categories, and that's also shown in this slide. I'm not sure if you can read it, but has all the categories that they review on any of our stroke calls that we have. They know what was done well or what might need improvement. And then we use this for continuing education. So pre-hospital recognition of stroke signs and symptoms, communication from our EMS to our hospital is very important. And then they go through and evaluate if we performed all the basically the parameters that we have in our protocol, the ABCs, the vitals, got the last known wall time, if we completed the stroke exam, blood sugar, EKG if time allows, if it's necessary. They, on that sheet, it's a yes, no, or not applicable question, and then they go through and review that, and then they add comments to it for our feedback if we need it. Towards the bottom of that sheet, they have what time we arrived at the patient. So they take this information off our run sheet and document what time we arrived at the patient, what time we left the scene, what time we arrived at the hospital, and then time versus completed for the call. And then that shows them if we were within our parameters of on-scene time of 10 minutes or less. And then that feedback lets us know where we need to improve. You know, if it was longer than 10 minutes, then we know what we need to focus on for those calls. Next slide. Challenges that our service faces is that we're all volunteers except for myself. So almost all of our EMTs, or probably all of our EMTs, are responding from a full-time job, which can create an additional response time to a scene. And that can be based on traffic or where they're located at the time of the call. Our protocols for responding to a call are to be here at our facility within 5-6 minutes of a page. And then the on-scene time of 10 minutes or less can be a challenge depending on the circumstances of the situation that we're walking into. 10 minutes is not very long, especially if there's any barriers that we run into, like patient access, getting into the house, if a patient's on ambulatory, or if we need additional help for lifting. We basically try to treat these as a load and go call. So we might get a quick set of vitals and then finish the rest of the assessment in the ambulance. We try to get a blood glucose level right away, and then see what signs are present for the stroke. The assistance that we get is communication from our dispatchers. We rely heavily on our dispatchers, and I don't know if all dispatch agencies are quite like ours. Our dispatchers are able to obtain additional information from the caller in most cases, and they assist us in activating a stroke code for our local ED prior to us even arriving on scene and evaluating the patient. So in our page goes out for our ambulance service, our hospital has a base station that they can hear this information. So they might also pick up on what type of patient we might be bringing in. So early activation of our stroke code for our local ED has been extremely helpful in working together and getting that continued care. Next slide. Successes and lessons that we have learned. The success of our service starts with the initial call from dispatch. They're great at getting that additional information for us and providing that information in the call. Communication of the signs and symptoms, communication to the ED prior to EMS arrival, and once we're on scene, our patient report that we give to the ER, and then how we treat the call as such as a load and go. The performance improvement filter, the PI filter, the feedback that we get from our stroke coordinator allows us to determine our strengths and weaknesses, both pre-hospital arrival and ED continued care. So on this stroke form that we get, they recognize us for our strengths and our weaknesses and improvement areas. They're not picking on, everything that we did wrong. It's not all negative feedback, so they do recognize what our strengths were. And then they list the disposition also on the bottom of that form, which patient disposition for us is kind of nice to know what happened to them. Were they transferred by air or ground ambulance, or were they admitted to the hospital, or were they released? A lot of times we don't usually know what happens to that patient, but when we review these filters, those that were on the call will recognize the name and know that a little bit of what happened and how the event maybe turned out. So it's kind of nice from an EMT standpoint. Next slide. And then the final thing, I just added a picture of our stroke team. Myself, I'm way over on the left, the ambulance director, and then our director of nursing, Landon, stroke coordinator, Katie, and our medical director, Dr. Tabor. And that's all I have.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kristen, so much. Thank you for highlighting a project and showing us that projects can be accomplished even with challenges, including like having a volunteer staff. Excuse me. Thank you so much, Kristen. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Also receiving a Commitment to Excellence Award, I want to welcome Casey Sievert, the Director of Pipestone Ambulance Service, to present on their QI project. Casey, welcome, and the microphone is yours.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Casey Sievert. I'm an RN and paramedic. I have worked with Pipestone Ambulance for 18 years now, full time. And we're part-time ALS. We run a little over 1,000 calls a year, between 1,000 and 1,100 right now. But our call volume, and Kristen can probably attest to this too, has trended up exponentially over the last 20 years. We used to be 100% a volunteer service, aside from the director and then a office assistant, and we've been able to add to that. We were able to add 2 full-time EMTs and 2 full-time medics in 2017, and we were able to increase that to in January of 2023, we were able to add another full-time EMT and another full-time paramedic, as well as about 9 part-time staff, so that our primary ambulance is 100% staffed and they're on site 24/7. And then we're able to staff with the volunteers our second ambulance. I'm not sure how many of you guys are familiar, being probably from hospitals, with Minnesota state statute that says if it's not like a life or limb transfer, interfacility transfer, you have to have another ambulance staffed. So that was prior to January 2023. our primary ambulance was still staffed a lot with volunteers. And when you're as busy as we are, a lot of times that gets very hard on people, on the volunteers who have full-time day jobs and families and I mean, everything else under the sun. Around the same time, there was a change at Pipestone County Medical Center. They had brought on a new ER coordinator as well as some ER like specific staff. Prior to that, they had a lot of locums and the clinic staff was still helping out in the ER and whatnot. So, I mean, things were in a little bit more disarray then, as well as like the relationship with PCMC and the ambulance. There wasn't as much of an understanding what EMS entails and what pre-hospital entails. And now that they've added, I mean, there's been a complete changeover with the new trauma coordinator who used to serve with us. She's still on one of the first responder agencies in the county. And she's worked at PCMC for over 20 years as well. Her and then bringing on the ER specific staff. There's some mid-levels and then Dr. Thomas Chapa is like the medical director for the ER. And then he jumped on with us as a co-medical director and now he is our full medical director. But he's been fantastic. They both have, Heidi Weedman is the ER trauma coordinator and both Heidi and Dr. Chapa have been fantastic about working with us and advocating for us and including us. They have invited us. We're part of all of the PCMC provider trainings now. We have ambulance specific meetings with them to, I mean, spitball back and forth and work on things and just be collaborative about, any direction that we go. But the stroke stuff, we have our own ambulance training meetings once a month and we've revised all of our protocols and everybody is, I mean, the volunteers included are fantastic about training and working with it and working with the protocols and trying to perform to their best ability. So I feel like we had, a pretty good stroke program in-house in place, but when our local hospital changed and Heidi came on board and Dr. Chapa came on board, and then they were revising all of their stroke stuff as well. And then they started inviting us to their stroke meetings. So that's really kind of what precipitated, putting in for this is just we weren't aware of, what the specific criteria is for hospitals, like, what their benchmarks are that they need to meet for, their stroke report cards and whatnot for MDH. And being included in these monthly meetings where, we go over not just ours, but there's 2 other small ambulance services in the county. So we can go through, any of the stroke reports. And we can QA them together and then we bring that back to our people if there is any information to share. And, we bring that back to the volunteers as well and train on these and review them also at our monthly meetings. We meet monthly and sometimes there's only a few EMS stroke calls and sometimes there's several EMS stroke calls. But it's been probably a year or better since, there was anything that we have missed, whether, somebody didn't get a blood glucose on a patient or they didn't, record the time where they activated or did the stroke team activation. Like Wyndham, we do modified fast scales and we document all the same things that they are. I picked up some things from your presentation as well, Kristen, that I'd like to implement here. So, I don't really know. I'm just kind of winging it here, but I can't express enough how having a good working relationship, with our local hospital, especially since we are not hospital based, but how much that has positively impacted, all of our operations, both, ambulance operations as well as hospital operations. And being able, not just with all of these stroke calls and meeting the specific criteria that we do, but any significant call PCMC is fantastic now about, meeting and having an immediate hot wash afterwards with any of the EMS personnel involved, as well as the sheriff's office. We do not have any police departments here. We only have our sheriff's office, and then, our few troopers that have this as part of their district, but they're fantastic. They go to nearly every ambulance call, and well, 4 of the deputies are also on the ambulance service, but they give incredible reports. I mean, before we get on scene, and our response time is typically, 2 minutes or less since we're here on site. But it just really between, I mean, like Kristen had said too, between dispatch and the deputies, EMS, and communicating that with the hospital while we are still on scene, while we are getting all the information and whatnot, as well as PCMC. And then, of course, when we get to meet with PCMC afterwards too, I mean, we do find out the disposition of the patients, the severity of what they were experiencing, if they went anywhere, what the entire outcome is, and we can share that with our people as well. So,
Wonderful. Thank you,
anyone have
Casey.
any questions?
Yeah, sounds great. We'll take questions at the end. That's not a problem.
Okay,
Thank you, Casey.
sounds good.
Appreciate
Thanks.
it. The final category is Extraordinary Results Award, and that celebrates the innovation and creativity to achieve extraordinary results and improvement in stroke care. We have 1 awardee in this category. In this category, we're happy to award Lakes Region EMS. And speaking for Lakes Region is Clinical Manager Tina Meyer. Tina, the floor is yours. Tina, I think you're still on mute.
How about now? Looks good.
Yes.
All right. My name's Tina Meyer. I'm the clinical manager for Lakes Region EMS, and I'll be presenting the quality improvement items that we have been working on the last few years to improve our stroke data collection. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Lakes Region EMS, just a little bit about us, is about 450 square miles of coverage in Minnesota, just north of the Twin Cities metro area. We run 3 ALS critical care ambulances 24/7, 365. We do 911s and interfacility transfers out of local hospitals. We also run operations for St. Croix Valley EMS in Polk County, Wisconsin, and have 2 ambulances over there. St. Croix does have Minnesota territory. They own the PSA for Taylor's Falls, Minnesota. And so they have some coverage area that is applicable to the data as well. Because we have ambulances in both states, the states look at things differently, but we look at things as a whole. And so if we change something for one side, we change it for the other. Our data collection will be the same. We can separate it out, but we look at it and implement all changes that we have as a whole for the company. Next slide, please. So I started in my position in 2020. And one of the first things that I got was this report card from Coverdell. This is a Wisconsin Coverdell report card. So it's giving us information on the data that we're sending to the state of Wisconsin for our stroke patients. I sat on this for a while. I looked at it. I looked into the Coverdell program. I looked at what benchmarks meant and those kinds of things, but didn't really do anything with it. I was very interested because Lakes Region EMS is the red column. We're submitting almost no data to the state, which is interesting. And so I knew that if Wisconsin wasn't getting any, Minnesota wasn't getting any either. And so we needed to make sure that we were fixing this for both states. Next slide, please. So we looked at this, and what we immediately learned was we didn't have some of these fields in our charts. We knew that our crews were documenting it. We saw it in charts, but it wasn't going any place that was trackable for us. Crews would document their stroke scales and their blood glucoses and their last known wells all within the narrative, and we could see that. But when we looked at it, we're like, well, we don't know that 100% of the time they're doing it because there's no easy way for us to actually track that. So the first thing we actually did was go into our charts and figure out all of the things that were missing. And so we immediately added the last known well field. We made sure that we had the drop-down boxes for stroke screenings. And then we worked on our validation scores to make sure that our crews had reminders to fill those fields in. We can put the fields there, but if we don't create a reminder for them, it's still easy to forget it. Our crews still to this day put it both in both places. They continue to put this information in their narratives, but now we actually have a trackable place for them to put this information where we can see that it's happening 100% of the time as well. Next slide, please. So one of the things we did was any chart that had a primary or secondary impression of stroke or TIA, we made sure that we had the field's presence, and then we wrote a validation so that if they said this patient is having a stroke as a primary impression, it flagged the fields and made them red until they filled them out. And it gave information about why it was important within the information, and then would clear it once they had the information in there. Next slide, please. Once we started tracking information and looking at this and talking to crews, we started presenting information to them and trying to figure out what they knew and what they didn't know. So we added a requirement for whether or not they activated a stroke team. And crews would come to us and ask us questions about this. And what we realized was crews didn't necessarily understand all the differences between the different types of stroke centers. And so we realized that we had to do some education on this for crews to make sure that they understood where they should be going with their patients, when they should be going there, and what it all meant. So we added this information to our guidelines. These graphics here are both from our guidelines. It's telling them where to go, and then it's giving a definition for what that means as well. Next slide. We also added within the reference section specifics on what that meant. And so they have a quick reference for, if I know that I'm in this area, where do I need to go? So I have a stroke and I am in Chisago City. What is my closest acute stroke ready hospital that I need to go to? And what is not a good hospital to go to? Our crews travel all over the state, so we include a wide variety of hospitals in case there are changes also en route that they're having with their patients as well, so they can do notifications and make diversion plans as necessary with their patients. Next slide. So after doing all this stuff, this is our report card 2 years later. This is much better. Not only are we meeting the benchmarks, but we're meeting them like 100% of the time in a lot of these fields. It wasn't necessarily easy for some of this. We provided fields, we created the validations, and we have the information. And it allows us to focus on areas that we still need to improve on now that we're actually collecting the data. You can see in this slide that our scene times aren't meeting the benchmark. We presented this at our fourth quarter education to crews with a conversation about why we're not meeting the benchmarks and what we can do to make sure that we are meeting the benchmarks in the future. And then trending it as well. 2 years previous, we were at 72%. So how did we end up at 30? Next slide, please. We also started compiling our data ourselves outside of the Coverdale form. This is we're utilizing Power BI to transfer some of our information to see how many calls we're actually doing well on and which ones we're still missing it on. And so the top chart is actually 2023 for the entire year. So our average scene time is 19 minutes. Our patient time is 16 minutes. We're tracking how many times we're documenting the last known well on all calls, and then blood glucose as well. This is just a snapshot of some of them. The bottom one is actually fourth quarter of 2023, not 2024. But you can see that we've made some improvement in some of our scene times just by having conversations with crews and trending some of that information as well. Some takeaways that we have is that crews are not necessarily interested in data. We really needed to instigate with them an interest in data and show them why it was important to them and why it's important to us and important to us as a company and for our patients. We worked at each quarterly for a few minutes doing this education, showing what our data was telling us and what it wasn't telling us, and what we were learning once we started to collect the data. It was important for us to educate on those pieces of stroke information that we felt crews needed refreshing on as well. So the acute stroke ready and destination places were something that we also covered with crews as well. We still continue to reevaluate that. Our current area of focus is our scene times with crews. We're still at an average scene time of 17 minutes. And so we posed to them, how do we save 2 minutes on each call? How did they save 2 minutes on those calls that really need it? And now that our data is fully informing us on all of these things, we're ready to take that step forward. Thank you.
Wonderful, Tina. Thank you so much for your presentation. And thank you to Tina and Casey and Kristen for all of your quality improvement projects. This really shows that you can do a quality improvement project at any size agency. Do we have any questions for the presenters? Feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand. Actually, there's no hand on this one, but unmute yourself or type it in the chat.
This is Shelby Mull. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
So
Go ahead, Shelby.
I'm more or less just a comment, but I'm an ER coordinator in Sanford Canby, Southwest Minnesota. And like Casey said, that good working relationship with your EMS crews is phenomenal to have. Like, I don't know how other people would do it if they didn't. We're very lucky to have that good a relationship, but our ambulance is Sanford owned as well, so that helps some. But seeing, Casey, how you've build that relationship, I mean, everybody is amazing, and keep it up. So good job to all the EMS crews, because it's definitely not my thing. So I appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Shelby. We appreciate that comment. Yeah, it never hurts to reach out to your EMS agencies. Just start that conversation. You'd be surprised how eager they will be to participate. They want to help the patients just as much as you guys do. So we're all in this together. Any other questions? All right. Well, if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to email me or reply back on the follow-up email that we sent out. And don't forget that the application is now open for the 2024 EMS Stroke Quality Improvement Awards. Here's the link to the webpage as well, and we'll have that as well in the follow-up email. At this time, I'm going to have my colleague Jamie put in the link for the follow-up for the survey, for our contact hours. There's also a QR code here if you're interested in doing it that way. You can scan the QR code, especially if you're on YouTube, and you can complete the survey and receive your contact hours. And we appreciate everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and a huge congratulations to our presenters for sharing their projects and what they've learned. We always look forward to this webinar and recognizing amazing work that happens all across the state. Any questions, please contact us at the email you see below, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.